Brayden Vaughn didn't plan on becoming a hero that morning. He was just a dad trying to get his 6-year-old son to school before the tardy bell rang. "Come on, Beckett," he called over his shoulder, tightening the frayed strap on his worn-out backpack as he held his son's hand tighter. "We gotta hustle or Miss Carter's gonna give me that death glare again," Beckett giggled, hopping along beside him. "Dad, you always say that. She likes you. She gives you extra muffins." "That's called pity, bud," Brayden muttered. They were halfway across the crosswalk when it happened. A black luxury SUV came screeching to a stop inches away from a woman in a navy pantsuit who had just stepped off the curb. The driver rolled down his window and started shouting, "Watch where you're going, lady." "You think I've got time to slam brakes for every distracted pedestrian with a coffee in hand?" Brayden didn't think. He stepped in front of the woman instinctively, placing himself between her and the furious driver. "Back off," Brayden said, squaring his shoulders. She was in the crosswalk. "You almost hit her," the driver scoffed. "Mind your own business, man. I am. She's a human being. You don't talk to people like that." The woman blinked, completely still behind him. Brayden didn't look back. He was too fired up, his heart pounding. It wasn't just about her. It was about every time he'd been overlooked. Every time someone had treated him like trash because he didn't own a suit or a working car. The driver cursed under his breath and pulled away with a screech. Silence followed, thick and awkward. "Are you okay?" Brayden finally asked, turning around. The woman looked stunned but composed. She was tall, poised, her coffee now splashed across her crisp white blouse. She nodded slowly, her dark eyes searching his face like she was seeing something unexpected. "Yes, thank you," she said, her voice calm and low. "You didn't have to do that," Brayden shrugged, uneasy under her gaze. "Yeah, well, some people need to be reminded how to act like humans." Beckett tugged at his hand. "Dad, we're gonna be late." "I know, bud." He looked at the woman again. "Glad you're okay." "Take care." He turned and walked off with Beckett, not seeing the way she kept watching him even long after he disappeared into the crowd. Bria Reynolds couldn't stop thinking about him. 1 hour later, she stood in front of her floor-to-ceiling office windows on the 39th floor of Reynolds & Co. headquarters, replaying the moment in her head. The way he stepped in front of her. The way he spoke to the driver like he had nothing to prove but everything to protect. Nobody knew who she was on the street. Dressed in a pantsuit, no assistant, no car service. She liked her morning walks. They cleared her head before the storm of executive meetings and boardroom power plays, but that man. Brayden, she remembered the child calling him. He had no idea who she was. And still, he protected her like it was second nature. She sipped the new coffee her assistant brought, barely tasting it. She Googled nothing, didn't even know his last name, but something about him stuck. A single dad, judging by the backpack, the way he held his son's hand like it was the most important thing in the world. Bria had dated before. Men who wanted her title, her money, her name. None of them had looked at her the way he did, like she was just a woman. 2 days later, Brayden was late again. He sprinted into the downtown cafe where he worked part-time as a barista and part-time doing deliveries. His truck had broken down again, and he'd had to drop Beckett off with Mrs. Lanning, the elderly neighbor who watched him when Brayden couldn't afford after-school care. "Brayden," his manager barked. "There's a catering order waiting for drop-off, 5th and Broadway." "They're already calling about it." He grabbed the insulated bags without a word, adjusted his hat, and ran. The moment the elevator doors opened on the 39th floor, he stepped out, panting. "Delivery for Reynolds & Co.," he said to the receptionist. "Conference room A," she said, barely glancing up. He followed the signs, knocked once, and pushed the door open and froze. She was there, the woman from the street, and she was sitting at the head of the table. Surrounded by a dozen sharply dressed executives, she was calm, confident, and every bit the powerhouse he'd never guessed she was. She saw him and her lips parted slightly in surprise. But she didn't look embarrassed. She didn't look away. Instead, she stood. "I'll take it from here," she said to the others. 5-minute break. The room emptied fast, everyone filing out with murmured nods. Brayden stood frozen, holding 2 trays of sandwiches like they were made of gold. She walked up to him slowly, her heels clicking on the tile. "You," she said, smiling. "I was hoping I'd run into you again." He blinked. You work here, she laughed softly. I run here, Bria Reynolds, CEO, Brayden swallowed. Right, of course you do, she tilted her head. You okay? He nodded, awkward. Yeah, just didn't expect to see you again. Thought you were, I don't know, a lawyer or an art dealer. Bria took the trays from his hands and set them on the table. You saved me the other day, you didn't even know me. Didn't need to, he said. You looked like you needed someone, her eyes warmed. And now you're here. Delivering lunch, Brayden shrugged. Glamorous life of a single dad. He expected her to flinch, to pull back like most people did when he mentioned that. Instead, she smiled wider. You have a son, Beckett, 6. He's way cooler than me. I doubt that, she said gently. You're already one of the most decent men I've met in years. Brayden gave a small laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, well, I'm sure your boardroom's full of guys in suits who smell like money and confidence. I'm just the guy who brings the sandwiches. Bria stepped closer. I like sandwiches, she said. He stared at her. Are you flirting with me? She raised a brow. Would it be a problem if I was? Brayden's heart did something it hadn't done in years. It jumped. I don't know, he said honestly. I'm not used to someone like you being interested in someone like me. Bria leaned in. Maybe that's the problem. They stood there, eyes locked, the space between them charged when the door opened and the executives began trickling back in. Bria didn't move away. Come by again, she said softly. Next time I'll order coffee too. Brayden nodded, still stunned. Yeah, okay. As he walked out of the conference room, his heart racing, one thought echoed in his head. What just happened? And why did it feel like the beginning of something he didn't dare believe in? Brayden didn't tell anyone about the moment in the conference room. Not Mrs. Lanning when she watched Beckett that night. Not the cook at the cafe who always tried to set him up with her niece. Not even Beckett, who would have asked a million questions the moment he heard the word CEO. Instead, he ran deliveries, cleaned espresso machines, and tried to ignore the way his thoughts kept drifting back to Bria Reynolds. The way she'd looked at him without hesitation. The way she stood her ground like she was used to being listened to, but still listened to him. 3 days passed. On the 4th, a new catering order came in for the same floor at Reynolds & Co. His manager handed him the slip without comment, but Brayden caught the way his eyebrows lifted when he saw the address. Brayden took the order. This time, Bria was waiting before he even stepped off the elevator. He nearly dropped the insulated bag when he saw her standing by the reception desk, wearing a soft gray dress and heels that looked like they cost more than his rent. Her hair was swept back in a low twist, and she had a quiet confidence about her that filled the space without effort. I was hoping they'd send you, she said, walking toward him. Brayden adjusted the delivery strap over his shoulder. I told them I didn't mind. She nodded toward the hallway. Walk with me. He followed her past a row of glass offices. People glanced up as they passed, some nodding with polite recognition, others watching with vague curiosity. Brayden kept his eyes forward. I've been thinking about the other day, Bria said, her tone casual but deliberate. About how rare it is to meet someone who acts without needing anything back. Brayden gave a small shrug. I didn't think I was doing anything special. That's exactly why it was. They stopped in front of a side lounge room Brayden hadn't noticed last time. She pushed the door open, revealing a quiet space with plush chairs, a marble coffee table, and a view of the city. I don't usually have time for lunch, she said, gesturing to the seats, but I figured I'd make an exception. Brayden hesitated. You want me to stay, if you don't have a next delivery for another 20 minutes, yes. He checked his watch. I've got 25. Bria smiled and reached for one of the takeout boxes he'd been carrying. Then it's settled. They sat across from each other, the skyline stretching behind her like a painting. Brayden opened his box and took a bite, grateful he hadn't skipped breakfast. Bria didn't touch her food right away. Tell me something about you, she said. Not the version people expect. The real stuff. Brayden leaned back slightly. You ask that like people are supposed to have 2 versions. They do, she said. Most just don't realize it. He thought for a moment, chewing slowly. I used to want to be a teacher, high school history. I like the idea of helping kids figure out how the world got the way it is. What changed? My dad got sick. I had to quit school to take care of him. After he passed, I couldn't afford to go back. There was no pity in her eyes, only a quiet focus. And now I do what I have to. For Beckett, everything else comes second, Bria nodded. He's lucky to have you. Brayden studied her for a second. What about you? What did you want to be before boardrooms and power suits? She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. A travel writer, he blinked. Seriously, I wanted to see everything. Write about people, places, the tiny details that make a city come alive. But my father passed away when I was 26. He left me the company and the board was ready to sell it off. I stepped in. Brayden tilted his head. You gave up everything. I thought I had to. Maybe I still do. They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the city muffled by the thick glass. Then Bria reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a small card. This is my direct line if you ever want to talk. Or if you need anything. Brayden stared at the card but didn't take it. What would someone like me ever need from someone like you? Her expression didn't falter. That's not up to me to decide. He took the card, slipping it into his pocket without looking at it again. Just then, his phone buzzed. One glance told him Beckett's school was calling. Sorry, I've got to take this, he said, standing quickly. Bria nodded. Of course. He ducked into the hallway and answered. Mr. Vaughn, this is the front office. Beckett's running a slight fever. Nothing urgent, but we recommend picking him up early. Brayden rubbed his temple. I'll be there in 20. He returned to the lounge, already sliding the delivery bag back over his shoulder. Everything okay? Bria asked, her tone softer now. My son's not feeling great. I need to go. Wait, she said, reaching into her handbag. She pulled out a set of keys attached to a black leather fob. Take my driver, he's parked out front. Brayden froze. I can't do that. You can and you will. He's just sitting there. I appreciate it, but Brayden. Her voice was low, steady. He doesn't need to know who I am, just tell him where to go. He hesitated, then took the keys. As he turned to leave, she called after him. Tell Beckett I hope he feels better. And if he ever wants to come see the view from up here, I'll make sure the windows are clean. Brayden didn't answer. He just nodded once and walked out, heart pounding again, but this time for a different reason. He didn't know what this was becoming, but he felt it. And deep down, so did she. Beckett's fever passed by morning, but Brayden's nerves hadn't. He didn't use Bria's driver again. He returned the keys the next day personally, walking them up to the front desk at Reynolds & Co. and handing them off with a quiet thanks. No note, no explanation. He didn't ask to see her. Bria didn't come out. 3 more days passed. Then Friday afternoon, as Brayden was wiping down tables at the cafe, a familiar voice made him freeze. You forgot the part where you say, welcome in, what can I get started for you today? He looked up, cloth in hand, only to find Bria standing by the counter, wearing jeans and a soft beige sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. No entourage, no driver, just her. I didn't think you drank coffee from anywhere that didn't have gold leaf foam, he said, tossing the cloth aside. I'm expanding my horizons, she replied, scanning the chalkboard menu. Also, I wanted to see where the sandwiches come from. You tracked me down, she tilted her head. You gave me your name, and I run a company with a legal department that can find a yacht in international waters. So yes, I tracked you down. He folded his arms. That's not even remotely creepy. Bria leaned on the counter, lowering her voice. You left without saying anything. I figured you were busy. You don't exactly have a lot of free time between saving the company and whatever else CEOs do. I make time when it matters. Brayden turned, pretending to rearrange cups behind him. I'm not sure what you're expecting here. Lunch, she said. He looked over his shoulder. You want to eat here? No, I want you to come with me, somewhere off the clock. No suits, no delivery bags, just us. Brayden blinked. Bria, don't say no yet, she interrupted. Just hear me out. He turned around fully, crossing his arms again, his jaw tight. One lunch, no expectations. You pick the place, I'll even drive, but I promise not to use the town car. He raised an eyebrow. You drive. I own a 2001 Jeep Wrangler that I keep in a garage 3 blocks from here. I take it out when I need to remember who I was before all this. Brayden studied her for a long moment. Then he glanced at the clock. I'm off in 20. I'll wait. 20 minutes later, they were driving down the coastal road, windows rolled down, the wind messing her hair in a way that made her laugh and Brayden glance over more than once. He directed her to a small seafood shack perched on a pier, faded paint and all. The kind of place locals swore by and tourists never found. "This is your big date idea," she teased as they stepped out. "I didn't say it was a date." "You didn't say it wasn't." They ordered at the counter, and Brayden led her to a picnic table overlooking the water. The sun dipped low, casting amber light across the horizon. Seagulls cried in the distance, and the scent of salt clung to the air. Bria took a bite of her fish taco and closed her eyes. "Okay, I stand corrected. This is incredible. Told you." She opened her eyes, watching him. "You always bring people here, just Beckett, on good weeks when I can afford it." "How is he?" "Better. Back to telling me how I'm not cool enough to wear cargo shorts." Bria laughed. "He sounds like he has taste." Brayden picked at his food for a moment before speaking again. "Why are you really here?" She set her taco down. "I wanted to see who you are when you're not keeping your guard up. I can't afford to let it down." "With me, you can." He met her gaze. "That's easy for you to say. You live in a world where people open doors because of your name. I live in one where I have to ask my neighbor to babysit so I can scrape together tips. I didn't come here to pity you. I didn't say you did." She reached across the table, fingers brushing his. "You think I don't feel alone sometimes? That just because I sit at the top of some tower, I don't wake up at night wondering if this is what I really wanted." He didn't pull his hand away. "I don't know what this is," he said finally. "But I know I haven't felt like this in a long time." "Me neither." They sat in silence, the kind that didn't demand filling. As the sun dropped lower, Brayden spoke again. "I haven't dated since Beckett's mom left. He was 2. She said she didn't sign up for this life." Bria didn't react with surprise or sympathy, just listened. "I promised myself I wouldn't bring someone into his world unless I was sure." She nodded. "Then be sure one step at a time." He looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time in years, he let himself imagine what it might be like to believe in something again. After dinner, they drove in silence, music from the radio soft in the background. When they reached the curb outside his apartment, Bria shifted in her seat. "I don't need flowers or grand gestures," she said, "but I'm not here for something you'll walk away from." He turned to her. "I don't walk away, not when it matters." Bria leaned in, slow and steady, giving him time to stop her. He didn't. Her lips met his warm, certain, and filled with something that felt dangerously close to hope. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "Next time I pick the place." He nodded, voice low. "Next time." The knock came at 7:22 on a Thursday night, just as Brayden was coaxing Beckett into his rocket ship pajamas. He paused mid-zip, frowning toward the door. No one ever came by unannounced, not unless it was a neighbor needing help with groceries or the building manager chasing rent. Beckett peeked over his shoulder. "Is it pizza?" Brayden ruffled his son's hair. "We didn't order pizza, bud." He crossed the small apartment barefoot and opened the door. Bria stood in the hallway, holding a paper bag with a bakery logo printed in gold. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, and she wore a long coat over something casual. Her eyes swept over him, no judgment for the worn sweatpants or the faded t-shirt he'd had since college. "I come bearing bribery," she said. "Chocolate croissants, still warm." Brayden blinked. "How do you even know where I live?" "You left your address on the catering invoice." "I remembered." He stepped aside. "Come in, just ignore the mess." Bria entered, her gaze settling on the toys scattered across the floor, the half-built Lego spaceship on the coffee table, and a crayon drawing taped crookedly to the fridge. Beckett came bounding from the bedroom before Brayden could say anything. "That's her," he whispered loudly, pointing. "The lady from the building with the big windows." Bria crouched to his level. "You must be Beckett. I've heard you're the one with all the good opinions on shorts and sandwiches." He tilted his head. "And you're the lady who gave my dad a ride." Bria smiled. "Guilty." Brayden cleared his throat. "All right, bedtime, spaceman, say goodnight." Beckett gave Bria a curious wave. "You can stay if you want. Dad doesn't let just anyone eat the last croissant." "I'll take that as a high honor," she said. Once Beckett was tucked in and the door to the bedroom clicked shut, Brayden joined Bria in the kitchen. She'd already set the bag on the counter and poured 2 glasses of water from the filtered jug in the fridge. "I wasn't expecting company," he said. "I wasn't expecting to show up, but I had a long day and I didn't want to end it alone." He leaned against the counter. "Everything okay?" Bria hesitated, then nodded slowly. I made a decision today, a big one. Brayden waited. I told my board I'm stepping back, not quitting, not disappearing, but I'm taking a leave, a real one, no emails, no emergency meetings, just time. His brows lifted. Is that even allowed in your world? They weren't thrilled. But they'll survive. I've spent a decade proving I can hold everything together. Maybe it's time to see who I am without holding anything. Brayden crossed his arms, watching her. So what happens now? You take a month off and decide you're done with skyscrapers and start selling jewelry on the beach, she laughed, but there was something raw beneath it. I don't know. But I do know I want to spend time with people who don't care what my last name is. He reached for the last kwas and split it in two, handing her the bigger half. You're serious about this? I am. They ate in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't stretch awkwardly, just settled in like an old friend. The apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the soft ticking of the clock above the stove. Bria set her half of the kwas down. Do you remember what you said the first time we met? I said a lot of things. You said some people need to be reminded how to act like humans. Brayden tilted his head. And you remembered that. I remember everything about that moment. Because you didn't look at me like I was someone to impress, you looked at me like I mattered. He studied her for a moment before speaking. You're not used to that. No, she admitted. And I don't want to go the rest of my life pretending I don't need it. Brayden stepped closer, not dramatically, not with any grand flourish, just enough to reduce the space between them to something intimate and real. I don't have much to offer, he said quietly. Not a big house, not a fancy car. I've got rent due next week and a kid who thinks I'm some kind of superhero because I can make pancakes without burning them. Bria reached for his hand. You have everything I've never had. And I don't care about any of the things you think you lack. He swallowed hard. It's not simple. Nothing worth it ever is. Brayden stared at her, the paper bag behind her forgotten, the apartment suddenly feeling less like a place he was stuck in and more like something sacred. He leaned in slowly, his hand reaching to cup her cheek, and this time when they kissed, there was no hesitation. No question of what came next. It was quiet and full of something steady, a promise forming between two people who'd never expected to find each other. Later, after she left with a whispered goodnight and a soft squeeze of his hand, Brayden stood in the doorway long after the elevator had closed. The next morning, a package arrived. Inside was a thin envelope with Beckett's name printed in thick black ink and a note tucked beneath it in Bria's handwriting. For the curious astronaut. Brayden opened the envelope for his son, revealing 2 tickets to the Science and Space Discovery Center's private evening exhibit, an event that was usually invitation only, hosted once a year. He stared at the tickets, then at the note again, then at his son's face lighting up like a sunrise. Dad, Beckett whispered, she's magic. Brayden grinned. Yeah, I think she might be. That night, Brayden stood outside the exhibit dressed in his best shirt. Beckett clutched his hand tightly as they stepped onto the red carpet, something Brayden had only ever seen on television. Bria waited by the entrance, wearing a navy wrap dress and flats, her hair loose and wind-tossed. No security, no press, just her. When she saw them, her entire face softened. She knelt as Beckett ran up and handed her a drawing, another rocket, this one with 3 figures inside. That's you, he said, pointing. That's me, and that's Dad. Bria looked at Brayden, and he knew she wasn't going back to the life she'd built before, not completely. They stepped into the museum together, hand in hand, walking toward the future neither of them had planned for but both had chosen. And for the first time in years, Brayden didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he was living. The first person to notice was Mrs. Lanning. She stood outside her apartment with a basket of laundry as Brayden came up the stairs, Beckett fast asleep in his arms after the Science and Space Discovery Center event. His little arms hung loose around Brayden's neck, his cheeks pink with sleep and excitement. Well, the elderly woman said with a raised brow, I don't know where you two have been, but that boy looks like he's been to the moon and back. Brayden shifted Beckett's weight and gave her a tired grin. Close enough. She squinted at him. And you? You look different. Different how? Like someone who stopped waiting for life to make sense and just started living it. He didn't answer, but as he unlocked their door, the words stayed with him. In the following weeks, Bria's leave from Reynolds & Co. became public. The press speculated, of course, but she didn't grant interviews or offer statements. Instead, she slipped into a quieter rhythm, one that included early morning walks to the corner market, phone calls that ended with laughter instead of boardroom silence, and weekends that began with pancakes in Brayden's kitchen, while Beckett lectured them on Martian geology. One Saturday afternoon, as the three of them sat in the small community park not far from Brayden's apartment, Beckett wandered off to play with a group of kids near the swings. Bria sat on the blanket, removing her sandals and stretching her legs into the sun. "I called my sister," she said, unprompted. Brayden turned his head. "The one in London," Bria nodded. "We hadn't spoken in 3 years. She always said I put the company before people, and she was right." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together without hesitation. "What did she say?" She said she missed me, and that she barely recognized the sound of my voice said I sounded lighter. He leaned back on his elbows. "You are." Bria looked over at him, the sunlight catching in her eyes. "I think I forgot what it was like to be known." "You didn't forget. You just buried it under everything you thought you had to be." She sat up then, crossing her legs. "I've been thinking of what's next, not for the board, for me." Brayden didn't interrupt. "I want to start something new, smaller, focused. Something that works with underfunded schools, gives kids real access to science and technology programs. Not just in name, but actual hands-on stuff." He blinked. "Like grants, partnerships, facilities. I have the resources. I just never took the time to ask where they could do the most good." Brayden smiled slowly. "That sounds like something Beckett would approve of." She picked up a blade of grass and twirled it between her fingers. "It's the first time in a long time I've thought about legacy and didn't see a skyscraper." His voice was soft but certain. "You're not the building, you're what happens when you step out of it." A few days later, Bria invited Brayden and Beckett to a soft launch event for her new initiative. No press, no cameras. Just a gathering of educators, volunteers, and community organizers in a converted warehouse she'd purchased and remodeled into a tech learning center. Beckett tugged on Brayden's sleeve as they walked through the open space filled with robotics kits, 3D printers, and wall-to-wall windows. "Dad, this place is like a spaceship school." Bria came up behind them, placing a hand lightly on Brayden's back. "It's not quite finished, but it's ready to launch." Brayden turned to her with a look that was no longer cautious, no longer guarded. "You built this from scratch." "I had help," she said, her gaze flickering to him. Later that evening, after Beckett had fallen asleep in a quiet corner of the center with a tablet in his lap and a half-assembled robot beside him, Bria and Brayden stepped outside beneath the string lights that lined the entryway. She exhaled slowly. "You know, there was a time when I thought I'd end up alone. Not because I couldn't find someone, but because I didn't think I could be truly seen." Brayden reached for her waist, pulling her closer. "You don't have to explain it. I've lived it." She rested her forehead against his. "But now I want to say it. I love you, Brayden. I love the way you fight for people without asking for thanks. I love the way you see your son and the way you see me." He kissed her then, slow and deep, his hands steady on her back. When they pulled apart, his voice was low, filled with something that shook him to the bone. "I love you too. I didn't know I could have this. Us. You do," she whispered. "You have all of it." Their world shifted that night, not into something unfamiliar, but into something finally aligned. Like puzzle pieces that had been scattered for years, finally snapping into place. 6 months later, Brayden stood in front of a small crowd gathered in the new wing of the tech center. Beckett sat proudly in the front row, wearing a clip-on tie and swinging his feet. Brayden adjusted the microphone and cleared his throat. "I used to think I had to earn everything the hard way, that maybe life had decided my ceiling early on. But then I met someone who reminded me that ceilings are just floors waiting to be stood on." He glanced at Bria, standing off to the side in a navy dress and a smile that had become the anchor of his days. She nodded once, encouragement and pride all over her face. She believed in this place long before it existed, just like she believed in me, and because of that, other people will get a chance to believe in themselves. The room applauded, but Brayden only saw her. Afterward, as the guests mingled and Beckett gave an impromptu tour of the robotics room, Bria pulled Brayden aside. "I have something for you," she said. Reaching into her clutch, he raised an eyebrow. "Please don't say it's a private island." "I'm still adjusting to having a dishwasher." She laughed and handed him a folded piece of paper. He opened it slowly, then looked up with wide eyes. "This is a deed. To the apartment upstairs, the one over the cafe. It's not a penthouse, but it's got a balcony and sunlight in the mornings. I thought maybe you and Beckett could use a bit more space." He shook his head, stunned. "Bria, it's not charity, it's love, and it's yours because you've given me more than I ever thought I'd have. A real life, a real home." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Brayden pulled her into his arms and kissed her, the kind of kiss that made time fall away. Around them, laughter filled the air. Children ran through the halls of a building born from second chances, and somewhere nearby, Beckett declared to a group of donors that his dad made the best pancakes in the entire galaxy. Brayden whispered against her lips, "Come home with us. I already am." And just like that, the life they never saw coming became the only one they ever wanted. A year later, the three of them stood on the same pier where Brayden had once taken her for fish tacos. Only this time, it was lined with fairy lights and a small group of their closest friends and family. Bria wore a simple white dress, her hair down, her eyes brighter than the ocean behind her. Brayden stood beside her in a linen shirt and rolled sleeves, Beckett at his side, beaming and holding the rings. When they said their vows, the words weren't grand or rehearsed. They were honest. "I didn't find you," Brayden said. "You found me. And every day since, I've been becoming the man you saw when you looked at me." "I thought I'd built a life," Bria replied, "but I hadn't lived until I met you. I love you, Brayden Vaughn. For your honesty, your strength, and for the way you made me believe in love that's quiet and real." When they kissed, the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting gold across the water. They danced on the dock that night, not with music, but with laughter, barefoot and free. And when they finally went home, Beckett asleep in the backseat and Bria's hand tucked in his, Brayden knew with absolute certainty this was the life he'd never dared to dream of, and he would never let go of it, not for anything.